Joining me now is Anna Culbertson and Kat Baker. Anna is with the organization 27 United. Kat Baker with OneAID. Both are helping bolster, support the federal workforce that were fired, agencies that were gutted, some completely eradicated during the wave of DOGE cuts from the initial weeks, months of the Trump administration. And they're really working behind the scenes to not only make sure that these fired federal workers have a support group, but also they're trying to find ways to continue the mission they had done from their 9 to 5 and outside of that regular work schedule. So Anna and Kat, I really appreciate you joining Byline. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. The first thing I wanted to ask, and both of you, please just give a broad overview of how all of your lives have really changed in the last couple of months as a result of these waves of cuts.
I'm happy to go first.
Sure.
Me personally, I worked at a company that implemented USAID funded projects. So as of January 24th, when the administration issued the stop work orders, everything that we were working on came to a halt suddenly. And so those weeks were filled with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of different information that was coming out. And within 2 weeks of us being notified of those stop work orders, 80% or more of my office was put on furlough. And ultimately, we were terminated this summer. So it's been a complete flip for us to go from, being gainfully employed, doing meaningful work, having supported multiple administrations, both parties, to now being unemployed, having our work villainized, and just having a lot of misinformation spread about us as individuals as well as the work that we were doing.
Anna, what was your experience like? What was really happening behind the scenes at that time?
Yeah, so just for like 2 months of background, I started my position at the NIH on December 2nd. So it's been almost a year. I was a probationary employee with the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And then I was a scientific program specialist at NIAID at the NIH. So I started on December 2nd and the administration shift on January 20th. And so things started to change within my workplace really quickly. And so like executive orders started to come out that affected our workplace. So there was a time where we were pausing to review things. And so we weren't communicating with the public. Like it started to get very intense very quickly. And then on February 14th, I was placed on administrative leave and then finally terminated on May 8th. Because I had been unemployed for so long, it was really kind of shocking when I first was first placed on administrative leave, but we'd kind of seen it coming from what had happened with the people from USAID and implementing partners. So I wasn't super surprised because there had been a lot of rumors. I made this website to try to support federal workers called Spoon Federal. And so I met a lot of people. It's actually where I met some people who were working with the OneAID community, like early back in March. And because of that, I got really connected and learned how a lot of different people, organizations had been supporting federal workers. And so when the reductions in force happened, NIH in April, I kind of knew how to build some community, what might be needed to help get people just kind of through this time because it was just really hard. And then our organization has kind of developed from there, but been a really tough time.
We hear the RIF, reduction in force term, kind of thrown around left and right, which is kind of a soft way of saying firings, as both of you are well aware. And I do want to dive in on all of the work that you're actively doing behind the scenes with 27 United and with OneAID. But if you can both kind of take us inside how it really felt behind the scenes when you got an idea, a sense that maybe yourself, maybe your colleagues were about to lose their jobs, but you still didn't know. And how did those notices come about?
So there had been, even prior to the change in administration, rumors that they were going to terminate all probationary employees, like early. So I had been stressed.
Even before the election?
Not before the election, but before the change in administration, so before January. So I kind of had that on my radar even when I started my role, but that, as we know with the court case, right, it's a pretty egregious thing. It's not lawful. Like you can't just terminate probationary employees. So at the time I was like, that would be crazy if that happened. And so when the change in administration happened and then the rumors started to come around again that probationary employees were going to be terminated, and this had, I think, been after the USAID people had been really targeted in early January or like later January, I was, like I said, I was kind of prepared, but it was really stressful. I had just I had like a background investigation interview the day before, and then there was like news coming out that was like probationary employees to be terminated. That was February, I think, 13th, that Thursday. And then the next day I was supposed to go home to go to I'm an Eagles fan, so the Eagles had just won the Super Bowl, so I was gonna go to
Fly,
Philly to
Eagles,
go.
fly for the Philly fans out there.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, I might lose my job. I should stay home. And I was like waiting all day to get an email. I was just like trying to talk to my colleagues, being like, are you okay? What's going on? Like, what are we doing? I think everyone was probably like on telework or remote that day. So we're just like communicating, like, what am I supposed to do? And then like at the end of the day, I got an email that was like, yeah, you're going to be like placed on leave.
Wow. Kat, what about the humanitarian world? What was it like behind the scenes at the time? I know you had mentioned the weeks leading up to the gutting of USAID, but, how did those notices really come down?
So it was a bit different for everyone. And one of the first executive orders that President Trump signed was January 20th on Inauguration Day of reevaluating foreign aid. So that was Monday. And then by that Friday, there were the stop work orders issued. For us in the foreign assistance community, a lot of this came in waves. So we were hearing a lot about DOGE entering the building, entering the Ronald Reagan building, which was the DC headquarters of USAID, going through files, people being shut out of their offices, not able to access.
What did they look like? Did they look like 21-year-olds running around? I mean, there was the so-called guy named Big Balls, who
Yeah,
was kind of the front and center of the DOGE effort.
were
What did it look
young
like?
kids. I mean, I personally did not witness them because I wasn't a USAID employee, but they were very young. I don't think most of them could legally rent a car. Maybe if you couldn't order a beer at a bar, they were so young. And so they stuck out not only for being very obviously young, but clearly not supposed to be there, lacking the proper authorities to enter the building. And so there were a lot of questions around the legality of what was happening. And so
I imagine security too.
and security risks, of course, access to information, grantee information. When DOGE started publishing their wall of receipts, they started listing contracts and grants that they had eliminated. Some of those were individual contracts. USAID had a lot of people that it hired on an individual basis and that weren't employees. So people's names, home addresses, their information was being published on this wall of receipts. So what we were experiencing in the USAID community, the other thing was we had Elon Musk tweeting about us nonstop about that we were a criminal organization, that we must die. And a lot of this was happening on Friday nights. So we were dreading weekends because Friday after close of business, DOGE would come in, things would be shut down, websites taken down, people kicked out, and things would be breaking over the weekend and overnight often. So there was a real sense of panic within our community because we are hearing things are happening within the agency to our friends, to colleagues. And then, of course, that has a trickle effect down to the private businesses, the nonprofits that implement projects like mine did, of what's even happening to the status of our program, our government counterparts, are they even still employed? So that was what we were dealing with, was a real dearth of information, kind of an emergency standpoint situation where things kept rapidly changing and the media wasn't able to keep up. The media isn't going to report on the intricacies. They don't have time of all these things that are happening within the government. And so we really had to look within ourselves as a USAID community and larger foreign assistance to share that breaking news, to share trusted, reliable information, because so many of us were not only worried about what was going to happen to our own jobs and those of our colleagues, but we were delivering life-saving aid overseas. Are our grantees going to get paid? Are our local staff going to get paid? Are our expats going to have the security vendors paid so that no one storms their office building? And we work in conflict zones, and these were very real concerns that we were experiencing at that time.
I want to get both of your opinions on this. Do you think these cuts were 100% politically motivated, or were some of them warranted? And if so, which ones?
I mean, personally, right? Like, I don't think that even if there have been these reductions in force and ways that the government has reduced its size historically, that wasn't the way that this happened. Some people might make an argument that there could have been less employees at any agency, but like the way that it was done, it feels like there had to be some political motivation, and there just was no. It was not done carefully, at least at the NIH, what I can speak to. There are so many things that aren't running properly because of all the cuts that have happened.
If you can, maybe give our audience some of the big takeaways, some of the programs that may have been halted, some of the work that might have been interrupted.
So one thing that really sticks out to me is that there's a particular database that physicians who treat cancer use, and that database is not being updated because the contracts that they had, the people who were working on it, like, are no longer working in that position, and so the information can't be continuously updated. So those physicians are not going to have access to like the most updated information. And there's a bunch of other like cascading impacts, but that's just one particular thing that felt like so egregious to me.
Did it seem like they had a fallback program where they could access that data, or this was for some doctors and physicians, as you had mentioned, that this was their only place to get it?
I think it's just more about like the resource not being updated. I think that the bigger concern is that there's just no one who's manning these websites, people who aren't being able to update the information. And so it's just not prioritized anymore.
Kat, you had mentioned a lot of panic behind the scenes with contractors, with nonprofits all over the world wondering if their programs were halted, immediately disrupted. What were some of the immediate impacts across the globe in terms of humanitarian work that was really disrupted?
You know, with the stop work order that was issued January 24th, all USAID programming ground to a halt. There was a lot of communication in the days that followed, coming from including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that, quote, life-saving aid would not be impacted. So what one could imagine is maybe humanitarian support, food aid, emergency medicine, but that was actually never defined by the administration. So it's not clear what they even meant by life-saving. And then when they were reviewing what programs to cut, that was, again, never transparent what hit the actual life-saving definition. And there's a lot of things that may look life-saving, and then there are things that may not. For instance, I worked in programming that countered violent extremism, countering Boko Haram, ISIS in West and East Africa, respectively. So these kinds of things are quite critical to national security interests and could be life-saving, but might not have matched that definition of the administration. I think it's important to note that to date, the United States government has not complied with congressional requests or media requests to publish a full and comprehensive list of what USAID programs survived the cuts. The Trump administration did provide one list to Congress that was floating around. It was publicly available. Many of us were looking at it and knew that some of the programs that were listed as active were actually terminated, and vice versa. So again, there's no even knowledge of what existed, what it currently exists for the public to access. So who knows if they were warranted cuts or not? There's been no transparency.
Who's leading the effort to try and get transparency here from the federal government? Is there someone in the House? Is there an oversight committee that's trying to spearhead this work?
On the USAID side, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee are the ones that were overseeing USAID. And those, as one can imagine, things have really fallen on party lines, with Democratic leadership on both sides, both committees rather, asking for this transparency, asking for Secretary Rubio and others like Pete Morocco, who was another leader within the agency for a while, to testify, to provide this. And Republicans have largely fallen silent and have not expressed these concerns publicly over what is happening, including many champions of foreign aid historically. They are not publicly going against the administration and the desire to dismantle USAID.
Should Democrats win back the House of Representatives after the midterms just next year, less than 365 days from now, who knows what's going to happen in the Senate as well? Some polling is indicating one thing, other polling, another outcome. What's your confidence level that Democrats, if they do take control of one of these houses and the legislative branch, decides to do a full audit, investigation, if you will, to see which programs from NIH, from USAID, and across other humanitarian and diplomatic agencies that were impacted by the DOGE cuts, and see which were primarily targeted, impacted, and try and reverse course?
I think, at least from my perspective, like, and I know USAID and foreign assistance has had a lot of bipartisan support historically as well, but NIH has like a lot of bipartisan support. Everybody wants cures for these really serious conditions and wants biomedical research. And the politicization of science that we're seeing right now, I mean, is so concerning. We still don't have a number of people who have been cut at NIH because there have been these like people who've been brought back. Like we cannot get a number. And we don't know. So I do think that, I would think that if the Democrats do, like, I would think so, because it's just there's so much support for biomedical research that like doing an audit and seeing the real impacts. I mean, we're going to be seeing the impacts of what has already happened in the National Institutes of Health for years. Like, you can't reverse the stopping or pausing of various scientific programs of clinical trials. I mean, it's not as easy as like stopping something and bringing it back. So we're going to continue to see this. So I'm sure there would be a lot of interest in an audit.
What do you think?
I mean, even if there was an audit, I think that the damage is done. Part of what makes USAID programming so challenging is we're not programming domestically, we're programming overseas. So the US government doesn't implement its programs. It relies on private businesses, NGOs, charities to implement those programs. How many of these organizations have had to close their doors or significantly reduce their staff? My company, the last I heard, it has a handful of people in its Virginia office left. So even if contracts start coming out, the community to implement them isn't there and able to respond. We don't have the human resources able to respond to disasters and conflicts like we did previously. And another huge part that I want to emphasize is we also rely on our bilateral relationships with the host country governments where we're working. So if there is a disaster in Jamaica, the Jamaican government needs to give us consent to come in. That trust is really going to be impacted. And not only are we not going to be able to mobilize and get people out there, get goods, it's then, does that government have the credibility? Because it takes a lot of time and effort to lay that kind of bureaucratic groundwork. So at this point in audit, I think that there's probably more egregious things that have happened. And we've seen it played out in the courts, that decisions are being reached about the legality of what has happened. And it's not always being enforced. The judge's rulings are not always being enforced, and the administration is ignoring some of those requests and demands.
If someone's lucky enough to find a job that they love and feel gratified with the work that they do, it often becomes part of their identity. What did these cuts, these firings, what did it do to you emotionally?
Well, for me, I was a contractor at NIH for 3 years and in the office of the director. And then my contract ended. I was like unemployed doing volunteer work for a little while. And then I started my position at NIAID. And so I had always wanted to work at the NIH. Like, I had a whole plan. I was thinking about, oh, well, I'll work here for this amount of time and then maybe I'll go back to school. I'll come back. I mean, so like personally, I was really devastated because this had been like a career path I'd kind of been seeing for myself for a long time. And then on like a broader scale, I think the newer employees, like similar probationary employees, it's like you're getting rid of people who are early career staff who are like, again, have been working so hard to get to this place with their career. And then the people who experience the reductions in force, I mean, some people have never worked outside of the government. Their entire career has been in the government. And I think that like what sometimes when I talk with people, there isn't always the understanding that when you sign up for a government job, you are like expecting this like stability. You're expecting to be there for a really long time. And if people didn't want that, they might go to like the private sector or in consulting, but people are like choosing this line of work for the benefits and for these things. And so the shift that like, that stability is no longer present in this line of work that someone had been working in their entire career and planned to retire from in 2 years is just like so disorienting. I mean, it's like losing everything that you knew about yourself, and who you thought you were going to be for the rest of your life. I mean, that's like all I've heard from people who are like in the same position as me.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
Kat, what's your take?
for me, I knew that I wanted to do this work since I was 16 years old and was looking at what colleges I wanted to go to and study international relations and volunteered with raising money for charities, Catholic charities overseas, did all my internships in this. I had a 13-year career in this. So for me, it really has been losing a core piece of my identity, believe fundamentally in the work that we were doing. I've tried my best to share with other people why this work doesn't only benefit people overseas, but does benefit Americans. And I don't just mean me, I mean American farmers, American universities that receive USAID grants to conduct research. There are a lot of benefits on top of then preventing disease and preventing, terrorism from spreading. For me, it led to a really dark time, I would say, especially in this late winter, early spring, because there's not only those identity pieces, which are really critical, there's also obviously the financial implications. I bought a house last year. How are you going to make the mortgage payment? I've applied to 200 jobs and got 5 interviews. And I'm a recruiter by trade. So I thought I knew how to manage the job search, right? Because I'm in that field. So it's really quite devastating. And I think all of us, but especially the USAiders that I know, are extremely empathetic people. And what really concerns us is our colleagues overseas. When all the stuff was hitting the fan, I was getting weekly messages from Sudanese colleagues that are refugees in Uganda, from Colombian colleagues, from Moroccan colleagues, everyone over the world checking in to see how we are doing and sharing what are these impacts on the ground. Programs, emergency response rooms that we were funding in Sudan are no longer getting the money they need to provide food, emergency medical care in the worst conflict in the world. So all of those kinds of crises are compounding. And for someone who's a very highly attuned empath, it quite frankly is overwhelming and got really scary at times, just feeling that the world is ending. And that's why I personally have really relied on activism, working with OneAID and trying to support other people, because I can't help my friends and colleagues in Sudan. I can't. But if I can share resources or provide connection to someone here, however that may be, I feel like I'm doing something. And that to me is really critical to try to maintain hope and carry forth.
I'm quite interested about the work that's going on with 27 United and with OneAID. What's happening behind the scenes right now to help colleagues? I'm sure you've made some friends out of this right now, out of an unfortunate situation. But what's the work going on behind the scenes? How is everyone accruing resources to support one another?
Yeah, so I can start on the OneAID side. We're an entirely grassroots effort. So we're volunteers. We're a core management team of 4. And especially in the spring, summer, we were just doing this full time because we believed in it. So we have launched a grassroots fundraising campaign on Give Butter, where we've been able to raise a few thousand. We are able to maintain a website. Initially, the volunteers from OneAID just paid to create a website out of their own pocket to list whether it was career transition resources, tips and tricks on how to apply for unemployment, mental health resources, and emergency counseling sessions available at no or reduced cost. And so those are some of the things that we're working on and trying to raise a little bit of money so that we can put it back into our communities. We have a mini grant program where we issue grants to our groups, and they're able to hold panels at universities or support congressional engagement, having snacks after a meeting with their representative in Congress and debrief. So we're trying to do those kinds of things where any money that we raise is put back into the community. But frankly, it's just a labor of love. And we do it because if we don't do it, if groups like 27 United, us, and many of the others that are supporting throughout the federal workforce, no one else will. And I think that's what's so critical. And that's why I've enjoyed working with 27 United, getting to know Anna as well. Is we just see it doesn't matter what agency you work, what your hiring mechanism is, all those bureaucratic things. No one in this world knows what we're going through to the same extent that we all do. And we need to support each other. And quite frankly, I think that it's a testament to the strength of the American civil service, public servant, and just our people that this is the kind of thing that we're expending our time into is really to try to help one another because we know if we don't, it won't happen.
And Kat had mentioned applying for 200 jobs and didn't get the result that she had wanted. Obviously, the work behind the scenes with 27 United and with OneAID in order to help people move on, but also cope as well, certainly is fruitful. But tell me what 27 United is doing behind the scenes.
So it's shifted over time, and I think Kat could speak to that too about OneAID, that like people's needs, the community's engagement varies and has been like a roller coaster. So I think we really started, it was really interesting the way that we kind of came together. But people who used to work at NIH who like were in workforce management would be like, okay, I'm going to put on this workshop to help people like update their resume. And then we had a bunch of people who were willing to do resume reviews. And we had someone who was like helping to do career coaching. And I'm sure if we received an email that some people wanted that from our website, we would be able to find people because those are still people who would be willing to do those things. We just haven't gotten as many requests as we did in the beginning. And so we did another job workshop like recently with an organization, Feds Forward. For us, we also do like weekly peer empowerment calls. They're open to anyone from the government, but it's just somebody who worked at NIH. I did them a few times as well. We've been doing that since July, where just people can come on. We have a pretty consistent group of people, talk about what's going on, how they're feeling. For a while, we did like job power hours where it wasn't like a workshop, but it would just be people would come on, kind of talk about what was working in terms of getting interviews, what wasn't. So we've always been like really community oriented. But I think we've also shifted to do a little bit more advocacy. So like during the shutdown, and we do this, so the NIH community does these weekly vigils outside the medical center metro where we all come together, talk about what happened that week at the NIH and just kind of at the government broadly, talk about the things that we've lost, the programs that have been lost. And then we go out to the street with some signs, just looking like to encourage NIH. And so we did for No King's Day, like a vigil that was more of like a protest, but then we also had a food drive where we collected over 450 pounds of food because that was like right in the middle of the government shutdown. And then 27 United also worked with the Federal Unionist Network, the DMV area, to do this people's pantry and also draw attention to the fact that SNAP benefits were going to be lost shortly. So we've done a number of other like advocacy things. We did a rally after this roundtable for a number of people who spoke with our director. So our support work is also a channel for allow people that kind of continue some of the things that have happened at NIH and discuss the things that have been lost, because there still is like this information gap of everything. Like I don't know everything that has been lost and all of the impacts at NIH, but I know a lot. And so trying to gather that information and communicate it to the public, like I think having supports for our community is really important, but also giving people an outlet to continue to do the things that they cared about and advocate for it, because so many people are just so sad. They loved working at the NIH. They love the things that they were working on, and they're like, this is not happening anymore. Or there's like one person who's doing my job that had like, this isn't a real number, but like 10 people, there's one person now doing all of the work. And so it's just like, people just also really appreciate an outlet.
You both talk about advocating for programs that have been erased. Are you able to actually continue some of the work that you had done at USAID or NIH right now? Or is that largely just completely stopped because the resources aren't there?
You mean personally, are we able to continue that? No. I think, on the USAID side, and this is really hurt, right? And this is what I felt bad about. I was in recruitment, so I just knew a lot of people everywhere from all walks of life. And I would feel really bad that these things were happening, that they themselves were losing their livelihoods. And so the only way that I've personally identified a way to continue being of service is by trying to share these resources. A lot of what we're doing is driven by is geared toward those that are based here in the US, especially in the DC area, because it's just where we were largely located. We do, some organizations have worked actually to do their own fundraisers to support its local clinics working in like HIV care. There's a great organization called Crisis in Care that's doing fundraising to try to just get money directly to some of these organizations. But there's no way for grassroots fundraising or organizations to continue at that scale. It's just immensely difficult.
And just similarly, like the NIH is the largest medical research organization in the world. So there is no like the money that we give, like the grants, because most of NIH work is funding universities. There's no way that any private or nonprofit organization could replicate that on the scale. I mean, it's not possible. But like some of the communications people can do communications who like have been riffed, right? They help with communications for 27 United and like bringing attention. So kind of doing communications for the NIH, but in a different way to be like, this program was lost. This is what we're doing as a community. We have one thing on our website called BioHealth Beats, and it talks about it's an anonymous storytelling to talk about people whose grants have been interrupted. So like if you're a comms person and you want to continue to do comms, but like for the NIH and you're interested in medical research, but you are not able to do that in your position, you can help us like in that way to tell these stories and talk about the programs that have been lost. We also do have on our website a worker marketplace, which shows, and OneAID is doing something similar, which is so good, which shows some of the adventures of people who have left, and some of them are doing consulting in the field that they were in their previous position. So like we can't replicate there's no way that we can do that, but we can kind of draw attention to and amplify efforts of people doing similar things just in a unique and kind of creative way.
Interesting. If you're a current federal employee, are there any warning signs you could possibly share that maybe they should look out for in case that possibly they feel like they're next?
The news, or like looking for like being on independent journalists. Independent journalists will sometimes report leaks, and just finding community, like talking to your colleagues and your coworkers. I mean, there might be someone who you connect with over lunch or something that you work with who's like, hey, I heard this thing. I mean, just being connected with other people, because if you're in isolation, you might not hear something that might not be public news yet, but like that people in your office might know. But it's really I don't think there's a formula. I think if there's another shutdown, that's something that people can be aware of because of what they tried to do during the most recent shutdown was
Sure. I mean, this government's only funded through the end of January, right?
Yeah, and I think the fact that you have to ask that question even shows the extent of fear that not only federal workers are living in, but contractors, people who, were working at private businesses that rely on federal government funds. And so I think OneAID does have some resources on our website, and others have published as well. If you're anticipating being ripped, what are some of the documents that you should prepare? Because, so many of our colleagues were locked out of systems right away and then can't access really critical forms in order for them to file for unemployment or move on. So there are some preparatory measures that one can take. And I think, again, what's been so impressive about this community is that I think different agencies and departments are coming together as the workers. I think Anna and I are probably similar levels, that kind of mid-level worker bee that are really trying to support. So I think what we hope to do too is share our experiences as OneAID and 27 United. We were some of the first, and so we have a lot of lessons learned for anyone that's hoping to organize, whether they are a federal employee, if they have their union to take advantage of. I did not have a union, so there are definitely ways that people can prepare, know that these resources are out there. And again, just really acknowledging the fact that one has to be so pessimistic and really prepare for something like that is egregious.
Last question I have for both of you. What don't Americans understand about the work of people who run the government? These aren't politicians. These are folks that are going to college. They have dreams, as Anna had mentioned, of working for the NIH. Kat, you as well, with humanitarian effort across the world. What don't regular people understand about the folks that really keep the lights on for the federal government?
I think from my perspective is just that we are also regular people, like you said, kind of like, and everyone that I've spoken with, it's like the reason why we've had, like probably over the time that we've existed over 100 volunteers is because people loved their job, loved working for the mission. and want to continue doing that. They love helping people. Like during the government shutdown, there were a bunch of feds who were doing a lot of community service. Like people who work for the government just care about their community, especially like civilians and like mid-level civilians. I feel like they just want to help the American public. Like that's a majority of the people who've been let go, and like all they want to do is continue to help and don't know how.
Yeah, that empathy is there, which is what Kat, you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, exactly. It's the empathy, and I think an interesting anecdote I always share. I've been working since 2012, so working across Democratic and Republican administrations. And for me, when I look back on my career, the first Trump administration was the busiest year, or I'm sorry, the busiest 4 years that I ever had. We saw a tremendous use of USAID, and USAID has always been aligned with foreign policy objectives of every administration. Anything to the contrary that is said is erroneous. And so we always see those shifts. Under the first Trump administration, we saw a decline in funding for climate change programming. We saw an increase in programming that was trying to protect religious minorities, usually Christians, overseas. We, as USAID employees, are used to supporting bipartisan administrations. That is nothing new. I think it's the extent to which politics has really creeped into public service that is unique. The way that federal government workers are being demonized, the things that are being said about us, our professionalism, our integrity, our credibility, are damaging us in finding new work in the private sector and making those changes that we've been forced to make in those pivots. And so that's what I think people don't maybe understand. And I think it's been a real struggle within the larger movement to get people that are willing to speak out, because we are used to just doing the work, getting it done. Whether or not we agree with the politics, it's neither here nor there. Everyone swore a constitutional oath, and we're here to serve the American people. But the way that this has been executed has been illegal. It is completely unprecedented, and it is a complete variance from the first Trump administration.
Anna Culbertson with 27 United, Kat Baker with OneAID. Thank you so much for your time, guys.